All right, and we're back with another episode of the Lakers Fast Break Podcast. Oh, wrong show. My gosh, I just got off the Lakers Fast Break Podcast. Thanks for joining us once again for the Pop Culture Cosmos, and we're back with the PCC Multiverse. It's that spooky time of the year once again. It's Halloween, and he's here every year as he joins us every year with his thoughts on the Halloween spectrum. You got to go ahead and catch what he's doing today at Hunnikween on Facebook. He's got two great sites, not only Hunnikween, but the Hunnick Outcasts as well. He's going to be talking about jump scares. Hopefully I was trying to scare you out there. And also the Yakuza series on PlayStation. It is my good friend indeed. It is Noah Ian Fein. And Noah, great to have you back on once again. Let's talk about the Yakuza in a little bit. But first, my friend, I wanted you to come up with 5 of your most jumpiest jump scares in all of horror movies.
Well, thank you, but we're going to have to use the Wayback Machine back in a time known as the 80s, when horror films were pretty much taking over everything. And it wasn't just in Halloween, mind you. I mean, they popped up anywhere and everywhere, especially at the video store and cable TV. But this is when you didn't have the orchestra of going da-da-da-dun and having you psychologically just jump and scream in the theater. I do want to just get on my soapbox for a minute and say in the early millennium they were doing that a lot. I don't know if you remember the advertisements for movies like Final Destination, where they would have the audience and they put on the night vision cam and have them jump and react and scream, and you can tell they were kind of paid actors to do this. No, I'm talking about the original jump scares when horror movies had some dignity to them. And dignity is definitely something that's not going on in horror movies today anymore, unless I feel they're more concerned about CGI. And I like I like the prosthetics and I like the animatronics more than I do with CGI. I appreciate it a lot more with the appliances and everything. So first things first, I'm going to, for number 5, I'm going to go with Poltergeist 2 for a reason. This is a bizarre jump scare, but this is with the actor who played Reverend Kane in Poltergeist. If we had more time, I would talk about this sequel and my love-hate relationship towards it. But the one jump scare, surprisingly, was not just jumping out and spooking you. It's a moment where Coraline meets... Oh, I'm sorry, Coral Ann. I'm sorry, I'm thinking of another movie. Carol Ann meets Reverend Kane for the first time in Poltergeist 2. And you just see, because the actor in real life sadly was suffering from stomach cancer, so he looked gaunt and he was dying anyway. So they didn't have to do too much appliances and prosthetics and makeup on him. And he just shows up and he starts singing this really creepy song to her, but then when she turns around, nobody else can see this man and walks right through him. And that just, for some reason, that sound effect, when somebody was walking right through him, that definitely made me jump at the time. I mean, this came out in 1988, so... No, wait, I'm sorry. 88 was Poltergeist 3. I think Poltergeist 2 came out in 86, I want to say. I know it came out a little later in the game. So, I was like 8 or 9 at the time. So this one definitely freaked me out. For number 4, this was a very underrated horror film. Nobody really talks about it anymore, or any less, if it is whispered at all, which is a shame. But it was a movie that I saw in the 90s that made me tremble, and when the lights came on, I just was like shaking. I was in my 20s though, but I wanted it. And I turned to the person, I went like a thumbs up, and thankfully this movie did get 2 thumbs up from Siskel and Ebert. Very underrated film. It's called The Relic. And I don't know if anybody remembers this. This is when legendary special effects makeup guy Stan Winston, before he passed away, he worked, of course, on Jurassic Park, a lot of Spielberg films. He directed the first Pumpkinhead movie, which is not one of the better ones. But he helped create this thing called the Gothoga. Very bizarre film about somebody going out into Africa and having his DNA mixed with that of a monster, and it comes back, and this thing keeps changing because its DNA run amok. And what was great about this is because it's also still in a time when CGI was starting to be used more. I mean, it was kind of used as an experiment in the 80s with something like Young Sherlock Holmes, and they tried it a little bit with Roger Rabbit, but mainly in the 90s, Hollywood was still experimenting, and it was like a hit and miss. But this thing came out in late 96, early 1997, depending on who you ask, because it was kind of shelved. It was supposed to come out in the summer of 96, and then it was slowly starting to premiere in places in December and popped up in January of 97. I don't know why it got shelved so long, but yeah, the whole idea is that this thing spends most of the time in the shadows, and when it pops up and scares you, you never know where it's going to come from. It's almost like Alien. But the difference between this and Alien, this thing is a little bit more creative because it's also the haunted house is the Fields Museum in Chicago. So if you've ever been there, you pretty much would know what I'm talking about. And you don't see the thing until the end. Most like like the Alien in the Alien series, but this thing was a little bit more creepier. I felt because I watched Alien so many times, I got desensitized, and this thing kind of like brought back jump scare that I've been wanting. For number 3, I'm actually going to go with 28 Days Later, and the reason for that, it wasn't just another zombie movie because these were fast charged. Actually, these were people with uncontrollable rage. So it wasn't so much zombification. And what made me basically do the jump scare, there is a moment where we have, and the actor's name is on the tip of my tongue. I know he played the Scarecrow in the Christopher Nolan series, and I should know this because I know he was in.
That's one of his favorite actors to go to. He's
Yeah.
in a lot of things. He's a star of 28 Days Later. He is, let me see, get the casting crew right here. Cillian Murphy.
Yeah, Cillian Murphy, that's what it is, yeah. He in the beginning of the film, he woke up from a coma and he goes to a church and he just looks at all these dead bodies, and one of them just like I've seen this before a million times, and a body just picks itself up. But it's a body underneath other bodies, and it's just like a little bit spookier. Like you don't know if it's gonna move or not. And also there was a lot of banging from the zombies when they're hiding in corridors. So yeah, that was a nice little homage. For number 2, I'm actually going to go with Ghostbusters because, as we all know, the Gray Lady scene. Again, I was about 6 at the time when Ghostbusters came out, so nobody really knew too much about that librarian scene. Used to live in New York. A friend of mine was also a huge fan of Ghostbusters, and when we got older, we would go to that New York Public Library a lot. We'd run down the stairs. I would be Ray. He would be Peter. We do what would you see? We'll get back to you. We did all of that. We did get to go through the library. It's a little bit different than what it is in the movie, of course. But I do know with the Ghostbusters remastered video game that came back for Xbox One and for PlayStation 4, and not to mention when it came out for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox, they do go back to that library. And both have a jump scare because as they now have their proton packs to fight the Gray Lady, they go deeper into the basement of the library, even deeper, and you hear ghost children. And because they go past like this rundown children's section of the library. So that was also kind of creepy. It had nothing to do with the movie, but I kind of like what it did. Also, finally, when I was in Manhattan a year ago before the world fell apart, I was at the Madame Tussauds Wax Museum, and they actually had a section for 2016's Ghostbusters, and they actually had something where you went through the subway and you went through the Chinese restaurant, their firehouse and everything. And there was a moment where the ghosts are playing with pipes, and they make it sound like they're interacting with you, so that was pretty cool. But number 1 for jump scares, I actually have to go with George Romero's Creepshow. I'd like to say it would be one of the zombie movies that he directed, or even Monkey Shines. But Creepshow, well, it didn't have a zombie in it, and there were several jump scares in that film. One of them, the Father's Day segment when the ghoul came out of the grave for the first time, and not to mention the fact Fluffy from the crate, which was the only good thing about that segment. Well, that thing jumped out. So, yeah, that's probably my 5 jump scare moments at the time when I was a kid. Now that I watch it, but memorable nonetheless. And
So I know you said you don't have an affinity for today's movies because of its reliance on CGI, and I get that. I mean, a lot of people have, obviously their concerns in regards to pretty much the horror genre and also sci-fi genre about going away from practical effects. I know a lot of people have talked about The Mandalorian they love so much because it incorporates a lot of mechanical and obviously prosthetic effects and things of that nature, practical effects. But I wanted to ask you this. Is there anything in recent times that might get people want to check out if they really want a jump scare, or has it just become too CGI'd for you?
we reviewed Krampus a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I loved about Krampus, and you agreed with me on this as well, is that when I watched the behind the scenes documentary on it, they went back to the well with animatronics, practical effects. It felt like a 1980s film in the 21st century. And that came out in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And we reviewed it a few years ago. And that actually, now that I think about it, that had a jump scare too.
Mm-hmm.
Because with the sister trying to get to the boyfriend's house and running from Krampus, and you didn't know where Krampus was, you just hear the howling and then him just jumping down and walking through the snow. That's why it worked. My biggest problem with having the CGI effect, I mean, even when I saw Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, I kind of knew when the jump scare was going to happen because they didn't build up to it. You just knew. Yeah, there were moments that were scary and the moments that kind of worked, but the problem is, since Hollywood has become so dependent with, as I said in the beginning, with the orchestra building up the tension and then going bam, or just having something jump up and then go boom, there's no real suspense anymore because you're so dependent on the scare than you are of how to build up the scare. And those 80 movies that I just discussed knew how to build up. They worked on the things on how you can build up the scare because you never knew where it was going to come. Everything now, I feel, is that you just press a button and the thing will go boo and that'll be it. Once that's done, even with I tried even to defend Stephen King's It 2017 and 2019 version. But when Pennywise in 2019 came out of that darkened kitchen, because I know it's a small kitchen, but it sounded like he was running for miles because he's Pennywise, and the kitchen is dark and he can't see, and he could be running for 5-10 miles away, and he comes out in that Roger Rabbit Bugs Bunny thing. People were laughing; they weren't scared or screaming, and that's a problem. So I feel that there were ways to do it. I don't think they're being done well anymore.
Well, my friend, you do always have a great heartbeat as one gives out when somebody has a jump scare. When it comes to Halloween, exactly. When it comes to Halloween and horror movies, and it's always great talking to you on the horror movie genre. Once again, it is Noah Ian Fein from the Hunnick Outcasts and also Hunnick Ween on Facebook. You got to go ahead and check out the Hunnick Outcasts and Hunnick Ween on Facebook today. But before we head on out, my friend, I know you wanted to go ahead and talk a little bit more about something you discovered recently when it comes to the PlayStation 5. And again, I would like to keep all my fingers in place.
Yes.
So please tell us more about your time with the Yakuza series.
Okay, so the Yakuza series, this was created, I want to make sure I'm getting his name right, Toshinori Nagoshi. I'm sure I'm getting it wrong. I apologize for that. He created some of the more memorable games for Sega. He did work on the first Shinoom game. I want to make sure I'm pronouncing that right. I think it's Shinoom not Shinume, but he did help create that game on the Dreamcast in '99. The sequels may not be that great, I know, but I don't think he worked on those. He worked on one of my favorite GameCube games called Super Monkey Ball, where you're a monkey in a plastic ball and you have to navigate through these platforms, and you have to make sure he gets from point A to point B, but the platforms will kind of tilt. If you ever played Marble Madness in the 80s, that's what Super Monkey Ball is kind of like. It's very challenging, very addictive, but it can be very rage quitty. The Yakuza series, from what I've heard, he did write a book about how he created this, but unfortunately it's only in Japan. And I've tried to purchase a copy through Japan, Amazon, but they won't ship the book from Japan to here. And I guess it's because of the virus. But I did find a site where somebody took some of the pages and translated them. It doesn't have the entire book. It's a shame. But from what I understand on YouTube with the documentary that I got my hands on, I think it was through JRP Jungle or Backlot. Bro, I got to look for it again. But he put his entire career into making this game about the Japanese mafia. And when I had my PlayStation 2, I remember because this was also during a time in the mid 2000s where Electronic Gaming Monthly and Game Informer were telling gamers, like, if you're tired of playing the same game here in the West, check out these games from the East. And I remember playing Shinoom and Super Monkey Ball. And so they were talking about Katamari Damacy. I think that's how you pronounce it as well.
Yep.
That's pretty much where an alien planet blew up and you come to Earth and you're collecting junk to create new planets.
Mm-hmm.
That was a great game. There was one called Mr. Mosquito where you are a mosquito trying to suck blood from your human victims without getting swatted. Another great game. I think it was just on the PlayStation 2. But the Yakuza games, the first two, were on the PlayStation 2, and I played the hell out of them. I like the second one a little more. The problem is that when my PlayStation 2 died, and I got my 3, which was at the time backwards compatible before that died, I kind of forgot about those games. And also, the Arkham series came along, and God of War came back into my life. So I didn't realize that you had 3, 4, and 5. And then finally with PlayStation 4 and with Virus, I had found out that these games were remastered and on the PlayStation 4. And in 2015, on the 10th anniversary, we got Yakuza 0, which takes place in the 80s. The first two games take place in 2005 and 2006 in present time. But I do like the fact that in 2015 you got Yakuza 0, and also the first two games got remastered, and they got something called the Dragon Engine, which meant that if you download or played a PlayStation 2 game with this Dragon Engine, the load times would be a lot better, and the frame rate was a lot better as well. And 3, 4, and 5, which were on 3, got a great PlayStation 4 treatment as well. So the graphics and the cutscenes were more than just a fresh coat of paint. This Dragon Engine helped make the load times and the frame rate a lot better and smoother to play these games. And what they pretty much are, they're a mixture of Japanese pop culture discussing, Yakuza or Yakuza. I think it's Yakuza. I want to make sure.
I think it's Yakuza.
Yakuza. You play as a character known as Kiro-chan, who works his way up in the ranks of Yakuza, will fall from grace and work his way back up again. Is trying to fight corruption within different families of the Yakuza. And from what I understand, with the 6th game, they decided that the character was going to be retired because he's now in his 50s. So with this new game that's coming out now, which is Like a Dragon, it's not so much as a spin-off. I feel it's another generation of Yakuza games, kind of like Star Trek, where you've had the first 6 movies, and now the 7th one, you have a brand new character. Now you're going to have cameos from the other characters, but now you're going to focus on this one. And they've made it a turn-based RPG for experimental reasons, but also because this main character, Ichiban, he grew up playing Dragon Quest, which was huge in Japan. Here it's I know it was Dragon Warrior here, but in Japan it was Dragon Quest, and eventually I think it finally is now just Dragon Quest. So if anybody's been curious, like why it was Dragon Warrior here and Dragon Quest in Japan, there's a whole big to do I'm not going to get into right now, but that's what it is. So in his mind, when he's fighting the bad guys, he feels that he's in a role playing game. I played the demo because I have a Japan account, so I downloaded the demo. Is amazing. It's these games are very unique because they're also known for their mini games and their sub stories. At one point, you can be cruising through the alleys and come across a 10-year-old boy who wants a porn magazine. You have to do like a stealth mission to get this kid a porn magazine. Another time, there's a guy who's looking for his pants because he was at a cabaret and he got drunk, and you have to find the pants for him. You don't have to do these sub stories, but if you do them, it kind of breaks up from doing the main mission. And these games, if you put a lot into them, can be anywhere between 50 to 100 hours, which is not bad. So you're looking at close to like 600 hours with the main story and the mini games and the sub stories. And the mini games are totally different because you can walk into something called the Sega Arcade, and you're pretty much playing old school Sega arcade games like Virtual Fighter and Outrun and Space Harrier. You could also be going to a batting cage and just working on your swing, but you're creating some more experience points and getting more yen to upgrade your abilities. You could be going to play pool and also gain money as well. There are casinos. So there's always something. There are these little mini simulation games where you can take down the 5 billionaires and buy up other properties. It's not Railroad Tycoon or Sim Earth or Sim Life or anything like that. Unfortunately, it's just a little mini game that kind of like breaks up the monotony. So, all in all, I've only played the first 3 right now, technically 0, 1, and 2. So, those are the ones that I've. You can get the definitive digital edition from the PlayStation Store if you want to. I think it's about $60, or the games are individually on the PlayStation Store digitally are $20. They're definitely worth your time. And then 3, 4, and 5 are part of the remastered collection, which is $60 digitally, where you can purchase 3, 4, and 5 digitally, I think for $20 to $24 a piece. And Yakuza 6 is also $20. It's separate. This new game that's coming out right now, Like a Dragon, if you pre-ordered it at $60, they have different versions with some more downloadable content. From what I understand, though, if you're not a fan of this series, you may want to put off on the downloadable content. I'm not too sure what it's really offering. I really didn't pay attention to it. I'm not a fan of downloadable content. I just feel like, it's usually just more skins and more weapons and stuff you may or may not need, because the stuff in a role-playing game you do attach can sometimes lower your stats. So it's 1/6 half dozen of the other. But if you're really curious about this game, like I said, if you have a PlayStation, you can create a Japanese account or a Singapore account, and you can go into the store and the demos and download a demo of the game, or even purchase the game. It's just going to be in either Japanese or Chinese, and you can get yourself the Google Translate on your iPad or iPhone or Android, and if you need to scan the screen if you want to look at the dialogue. But it's a very user-friendly turn-based RPG, and I feel this is what the RPG games should be right now, because it's not just 4 guys on one side and 4 guys on another side. It's your party members are spread out. So if you attack somebody and they're on the ground, you could quickly use your partner to go and finish that individual off. So, for example, my main guy uses a baseball bat on a thug. I can use another party member that's this homeless guy, and he can go up to the guy that's wounded on the ground and use a basic attack to finish that opponent off, or use a special attack to finish that opponent off. and it's kind of like South Park as well, where you can use the environment and you can knock them into a bicycle or car, and that'll create more damage as well. But the special attacks for this game, as again, there's this homeless guy that can throw bird seed on a character, and the birds will start pecking at them, kind of like with Home Alone 2, if you remember that homeless bird lady. Definitely one of the more. Now, this game, unfortunately, really quick, it will be available on the PlayStation 4 on November 10th. For PlayStation 5, though, it won't be available until March. I want to say March 10th, 2021. I know it's going to be out in March, but if you're getting the Xbox Series 1 X, this will be a launch title. It's the first time a Yakuza game, as far as I know. Well, I haven't played Xbox in decades, so I don't know of any Yakuza games. I'm sorry, excuse me, Yakuza games.
Okay, well, let me give everybody the breakdown right now for it. For Yakuza Like a Dragon, it came out in January in Japan for the PlayStation 4. Let's get that out of the way right now. It is a 2020 game. It's one of the earliest entries into the 2020 year for video games, but they are now releasing it worldwide, North America, whatnot, on the PlayStation 4 on November 10th. But for the Xbox and Series and the PlayStation 5, the next generation, here's the deal. Xbox Series X is getting its own rendition of Yakuza Like a Dragon. It's getting its own rendition on launch day on November 10th. And also want to go ahead and mention that for the PlayStation 5 owners, you mentioned it's not coming until March, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
As far as I know, yes. It's getting a March release for some reason.
Okay, so maybe a timed exclusive, so to speak, but it is going to come to PlayStation 5 as well. But I will tell you that it is something that I think a lot of people need to go out of their way to play. It's one of the better games of this year that's come out. A lot of good reviews up behind it. And on a new generation platform, there's almost instant loading times based off of the SSD that's in both the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series. There's almost instant loading times right there for you. So it really enhances the game even more. So give it a try. The Yakuza Like a Dragon, when it comes out here in the next week, in the coming weeks here, to either the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, or Xbox Series X, and then also later on PlayStation 5. But the Yakuza series as a whole, you heard the rundown by Noah already. So many Yakuza games already. It is a classic series in and of itself. So hopefully you will get a chance if you want to delve into it like Noah has. He's been going off on his social media on it now for about a week and a half already. So he's really enjoying his time in it. And I hope if you give Yakuza a chance without getting your fingers chopped off, hopefully you'll get a chance to go ahead and give it a whirl as well. But I will tell you, my friend, it's been great speaking to you on the spooky Halloween right here interview that we're having. All ready for those jump scares coming at you out there. But we truly appreciate you taking the time to speak to us right here, and wishing you and everyone out there a happy and safe Halloween. Any last thoughts on the way out, my friend?
I just want to let everybody know, stay safe. In my neck of the woods in Florida, we're having curfews, unfortunately. They're having them very early because of the virus, between 7 p.m. and 6 a.m. the next morning. I can understand why. I don't know what it's like for you where you are. I hope they don't have a curfew. I have not really been in the Halloween spirit. I really haven't been watching any horror films and watching ghost documentaries this year. I really hate to be cynical. And let's not forget, because we really didn't talk about this. I'm sure you've talked about how Charlie Brown is no longer on ABC, that they put it on, which also is the final nail in the coffin for me. I have Apple TV, that's great, but for everybody else that doesn't, it's really, and it's my favorite Halloween special ever. But I feel that
it is free though for everybody. That
I know it's free, but it's not going to be free after a while. That's what bothers me, because it's only free for a certain amount. And not everybody wants to invest in all these subscription services.
Of course.
So I know there's a petition for it. I just feel that this has not really been a great year, and I just hope that next year is going to be a little better, especially movie wise. Because again, really quick, I don't know horror movie wise right now what's even out or what's coming or what got pushed back. Best thing I can tell you, if you're interested or anybody else is interested, if you have an Amazon Prime account, get Shudder because you get some really great 80s horror films. And there's something called In Search of Darkness that has a 4-hour documentary on 80s horror movies. It's on, again, if you have the Shudder account, it's definitely worth your time just to hear it and hear Wes Craven from Beyond the Grave and every horror film we've discussed over the years. Past that, I wish everybody a really happy and safe Halloween for what it is. Please stay safe out there, but here's to 2021, man.
Here's to 2021 indeed. Once again, it's Noah Ian Fein from Hunniqueen and the Hunnic Outcast. You got to go ahead and check him out each and every time out that he posts something new on Facebook at the Hunnic Outcast and Hunniqueen as well. Well, Noah, looking forward to a scary Halloween, but a safe one. I cannot thank you enough for being a part of today's show. Looking forward to when you jump back on again with us right here at the Pop Culture Cosmos.